Call this legendary aircraft an ME-109 anywhere on the internet, and you're really taking your life into your own hands. Corrections will be swift and delivered to the hilt. So should this aircraft only ever be referred to as a BF-109, and is it a capital F or a little f? Well, I put the question to you guys, and this was the result. I actually know my answer, which is a little different to what you guys said, but it's important to go through all the evidence that is floating around the internet and finally come up with a definitive answer, particularly one that doesn't depend on the ego of this bloke. So why all this BF and ME confusion anyway? It all goes back to who designed and built the fighter to begin with. Cue the excellent German pronunciation. Willy Messerschmitt's career is both inspiring as well as truly despicable at times. He was an ambitious man, but ultimately a pragmatist. A lot has been written about the man, but the most important question here is, why did the 109, when almost all sources mention Willy's surname in association with it, not automatically gain the designation ME, such as with the 210, 410, 323 and 262? Well, here it is in a nutshell. Despite having started his own company as a very young man, state economics forced him to give up his preference for self-determination. In the late 1920s, the German aviation industry became less constrained under the conditions set out in 1919 at Versailles. At any rate, the former foe was even less inclined to enforce those demands. As a result, each German state looked to invest in their local aircraft companies. For Bavaria, there was the state-grown Bayerische Flugzeugwerke. This company was created in 1926, as was Willy's own Messerschmitt Flugzeugbau GmbH Bamberg. Due to the lack of funds, the Bavarian state was unable to subsidise every aircraft designer or manufacturer. It had to be BFW, seeing that the major stake in the organisation was owned by the RVM in Berlin. Therefore, in 1927, Messerschmitt was placed at a crossroads: continue alone with no hope of additional funding, or be merged with BFW. Despite preferring his freedom, practicality meant that Messerschmitt Flugzeugbau ceased to exist, and Willy Messerschmitt became chief designer for BFW. The arrangement was not entirely one-sided, and Messerschmitt even negotiated the rights to his patents and designs, as well as a personal cash percentage for nearly all future aircraft sold. In essence, Messerschmitt Flugzeugbau became a company within a company, all but in name. However, this is where the twist comes. In 1928, the RVM came under extreme criticism for its investment of public funds in the aircraft industry, and decided to offload its shares in BFW. Seeing an opportunity, Messerschmitt bought up 12.5% of these shares and was able to convince some rich friends to pick up the other 87.5%. These weren't just any friends. The Strohmeyer, Rollina's family's purchase of these shares is notable, especially when you discover the husband, Otto Strohmeyer, became the new chairman, and his wife, Baroness Lily von Michel Raulino, later married Messerschmitt himself in 1952. Lily and Willy were extremely close, and she remained an important guiding figure in his career almost from day one. While Strohmeyer was head of the board as chairman, it was Messerschmitt and Fritz Hiller who actually ran the company day to day. So within a year of merging with BFW, Messerschmitt was pretty much in charge of the company and its future. So, to his mind, it must have felt very much like his own company. This is worth remembering, as it's important for later. Why all this industrial intrigue? Well, it's relevant to our question because when the RLM changed its identification system for aircraft around mid-1934, Messerschmitt was still working for a company called BFW, even though he was essentially running it. At this time, each aircraft company was given a batch of numbers for its aircraft and future designs, preceded by the first two letters of its name or acronym. Therefore, Messerschmitt's prototype that had just taken to the air that June, the M37, M being the personal designation chosen internally by Willy himself, suddenly became the BF-108. As Erhard Milch was in charge of the RLM and had something of a vendetta against Messerschmitt, could this act have been malicious in any way? Whatever the reasoning, when his revolutionary new fighter design took to the air the following May, it was designated the BF-109. So there you have it, debate over, no question about it, this aircraft is a BF and not an ME. But it's not that simple. On the 11th of July 1938, Willy Messerschmitt became the chairman of BFW and immediately changed the company's name to Messerschmitt AG.
Your name will also go on the list.
Following the change, the RLM now gave all aircraft from the Messerschmitt works the designation ME. So, obviously, being a German story, every aircraft coming out of the company prior to this date must be a BF, and anything after, ME, right? Dig a little deeper, and you discover that the Germans, especially during the conflict, didn't seem to care. Official documentation, books and aerodynamic reports can carry the designation BF 109 or ME 109, as well as, inexplicably, both terms, in the same document. Did the manufacturer or the government champion one over the other? Most researchers would say not. The terms were used interchangeably, and people seemed to just understand what you were talking about. However, when you look at that pretty popular document that seems to pop up in any answer to this debate, and of course I'm going to use it too, you might have to stop and pay attention. In a report on the 109 written up by one Kalinowski in 1943, the term BF 109 appears on one page, while ME 109 appears nearly everywhere else. The tests were carried out by Messerschmitt AG, so the company liked to use the term ME. One interesting point, which I don't think has been highlighted before, is what the German public called these aircraft. There seems to be a complete absence of BF in the state-controlled German press of the time. These aircraft, the 108, 109 and 110, are either referred to by the designer's name and their number, or ME 108, 109 or 110. I can only conclude that this is a case of collective unconscious adoption of the ME designation by journalists across the country, or some excellent marketing on the part of Messerschmitt AG. I mean, why would Joseph care what it was called? This being said, Willy did have some excellent links with high-ranking Nazis, Hess and Goering to name two, and joined the party early on. Could this have helped push the ME designation onto all his previous designs? Again, this point makes a lot more sense a little later in our story when we hear from this man himself. Right, so does that mean that both terms should be given the same level of legitimacy? Well, let's throw a spanner in the works here and consider another point of view: the enemies. If you're weird like me and enjoy reading combat reports from this period, I challenge you to find one reference to the BF 109. In Russian accounts, the Argo seems to be Messers among pilots, or ME 109 on documents. In the English-speaking world, almost without exception, it's ME 109 or simply 109. The same goes for the 110. This is no doubt due to the fact that when war broke out, these aircraft were being knocked out by a company called Messerschmitt and not BFW. Indeed, even German airmen didn't seem to use BF as a name for their 109, or, as they often called them, Meine Messerschmitt. So does this mean that we should go with the crowd? If most sources and contemporary reports call this aircraft an ME 109, shouldn't that be the de facto reference? Well, this probably would be the case if a couple of purists didn't start digging around through German documents around the 1960s. This is ultimately when the BF 109ers started to write outraged letters to papers and magazines quoting the parlance used by Allied veterans. Remember, in Germany, they didn't really care. One interesting opinion is from the man who actually designed the thing. Wingleader YouTube channel, which is excellent by the way, brought up a very interesting point in their video about this very topic. There, Mark uncovered a letter that Willy had written much later in life when posed this very question by an aviation journal. He was adamant that his 109 was an ME through and through. You can sort of see his point given his position in the company at the time of its design, but isn't that just ego speaking? Messerschmitt AG may well have been the driving force behind the development of the 109, but the first prototype did take flight while Willy was still under contract with BFW. Sure, most of the things were built after the company's rebranding, but the RLM didn't rename existing Messerschmitt designs pre-1938. As Willy was to find out personally, it's not so easy to gloss over events and facts from your past. So what's the answer? Should we all be pedantic and follow the initial designation, even though the German establishment used both terms interchangeably often favouring ME, should we continue to denounce the ME109ers as dunces wherever we encounter them? I have a better suggestion. Initially, I had a different conclusion for this video, but that's the wonderful thing about research. You can uncover new ideas. Being a very heavily Anglo-Allies based researcher, I always said go with what the men who fought these machines said. But instead, I'd like to go back further, to 1066. English is a weird language, mainly because of 1066 and the Battle of Hastings. Just hear me out, I'm going somewhere with this. Depending on who was speaking, the same thing could have a different word. For the peasant toiling in the field, Old English was used to describe the animals found there. When the Normans arrived, they used Norman French to describe the same beasts, which they normally met at the dinner table. That's why we have French-sounding words for our meat, and less French-sounding words for the animals that meat comes from. So, when we're being technical and describing the design, it probably should be BF109. It's the term that best fits the environment. But when we're describing the action and events the men faced, especially the Allies, I'm all for saying ME109, just as they did. I'm also a strong advocate for telling anyone who corrects you about this that even Messerschmitt AG used both terms. So there. What do you think? And in case you're still wondering, it should probably be a little F.